Splash! The massive sound of someone hitting the water exploded in my ears, accompanied by the chaotic screams of those around me. Ah! The prince has fallen into the water. Help! Someone! Come quickly! The icy wind, thick with mist, lashed against my face. I snapped my eyes open. Coming into view were the familiar white marble steps by the Tay Pond in the Princess Royal's estate. Not far away, Qi Yuan was struggling desperately in the bottomless lake, his hands clawing wildly at the surface, his face a mask of terror and despair. The surrounding female guests were in a state of chaos, yet no one dared to enter the water. Meanwhile, Bai Ruo was hiding behind the crowd, her eyes flickering, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. This scene is so familiar it makes my very bones and blood go numb. I have actually returned to 8 years ago, to the very day Qi Yuan fell into the water. The surrounding screams feel as if they are muffled by a film of water, sounding distant and surreal. I stand frozen on the white marble steps, my gaze locked onto Qi Yuan as he struggles frantically in the Tay pool. The cold wind is like a blade, carving a faint ache into my face. This is no deathbed hallucination. The biting chill and the violent thumping of the heart in my chest are telling me clearly, I have been reborn. I returned to that spring banquet in the 13th year of Yonan, the very day that would burden me with a lifetime of infamy and ruin my reputation for years to come. In the water, Qi Yuan choked on several gulps, his struggles gradually weakening as his head began to bob fitfully above the surface. At this exact moment in my previous life, I had already kicked off my embroidered shoes and flung aside my cloak without a second thought, diving like a fool into the bone-chilling spring water to rescue the man who would later trample me underfoot and subject me to every kind of humiliation. But in this life, I slowly pulled my brocade cloak tighter around me, folding my hands deep within my sleeves, my gaze cold and devoid of even a ripple of emotion. Why should I save him? Save him so he can once again indulge Bai Ruo in framing me? Save him so he can sicken me with that look in his eyes, as if he were staring at a piece of trash? No, I, Qin Wan, will never repeat the same mistakes. Cousin, you're a strong swimmer. Hurry and save the heir. If anything happens to him, the Marquis of Jing'an's household will certainly not let this rest. Just as I was watching coldly from the sidelines, Bai Ruo suddenly rushed out from the crowd and grabbed my arm. She was weeping piteously, looking so frantic that one would think the person struggling in the water was her own father. Her shrill voice instantly drew the attention of everyone around us. She's right, Miss Jing. I heard you've practiced martial arts with your father and brothers since childhood and are an expert swimmer. Please, go down and save him. If no one helps, the heir will lose his life. Since you know how to swim, how can you just stand by and watch him die? The Jing family is a lineage of military commanders, known for their chivalry and courage. How is it that at this critical moment, the legitimate daughter of the Jing family has turned into a shrinking turtle? Those noble ladies were too afraid of death to jump into the water themselves. Yet now they stood on the moral high ground, self-righteously demanding that I risk my life. I looked into Bai Ruo's eyes, which were brimming with calculation, and a mocking sneer curled the corners of my lips. In our previous life, she stole the credit. In this life, she has learned to use moral kidnapping instead. Cousin Bai Ruo, I said, forcefully flinging her hand away, my voice cold and firm. I may know how to swim, but the water in Tay Pond is bone-chillingly deep. I am but a weak woman. How could I possibly drag a frantic, grown man to safety? Furthermore, men and women should maintain proper distance. If I were to save the heir, what would become of my reputation? Bai Ruo clearly hadn't expected me to be concerned with my reputation at a time like this. She froze for a moment, then began to wail even harder. Cousin, is reputation really more important than a human life? Don't you usually admire the heir the most? How can you just stand there and watch him die? What a convenient label to pin on me, admiring the heir. If I do not save him today, I will be branded as Jingwan, the cold-blooded and heartless woman who stood by and watched someone die. If I do save him, I will be labeled as shameless, someone who would discard her own reputation just to cling to the rich and powerful. Either way, she would have me nailed firmly to a pillar of shame. since my dear cousin is so anxious for the prince and believes that a human life is more important than anything else, why don't you go down and save him yourself? I took a step closer, my gaze piercing as I stared her down. The water may be cold, but for the sake of your true feelings, I'm sure you would be more than willing, wouldn't you? Bai Ruo was forced back repeatedly by my oppressive gaze, her face turning deathly pale, forgetting even to cry. She was merely a delicate flower of the inner chambers who couldn't even lift a finger. If she actually jumped in, she would likely die even faster than Qi Yuan. Qi Yuan was on the verge of sinking beneath the water, while the surrounding chatter grew increasingly loud and piercing. Seeing that I was unmoved by either her pleas or threats, and knowing that if Qi Yuan truly died, her dream of marrying into the Marquis's manor would be completely shattered, a fleeting look of ferocity flashed across Bai Ruo's delicate face in her desperation. Just as I was about to turn and leave this den of trouble, a sudden, powerful force struck me from behind. Since you refuse to save him, cousin, then you leave me no choice. Bai Ruo's voice was kept extremely low, yet it carried the viciousness of a cornered animal. Splash! Caught completely off guard, I lost my balance and tumbled headfirst into the freezing Tay pond. The bone-chilling lake water instantly engulfed me from all sides. It was cold, a cold that could freeze one's very soul, seeping frantically into the marrow of my bones. Icy water surged into my nose and throat, bringing with it a violent sense of suffocation. I struggled to open my eyes underwater. Through the murky depths, I caught a blurred glimpse of the noble ladies crying out in alarm on the shore, and Bai Ruo's face, twisted with the triumph of her successful scheme. She wanted to force me into the water. Once I was in, driven by instinct and the pressure of the onlookers, I would be compelled to save Qi Yuan. As long as Qi Yuan was saved, she could repeat her old tricks and pour all the blame onto me once again. What a vicious scheme! Not far away, Qi Yuan was splashing frantically in the water. Like a drowning man clutching at a straw, he instinctively struggled toward the spot where I had fallen. If he caught hold of me, in his state of extreme panic, he would surely cling to me with a death grip and drag me down into the abyss with him. The overwhelming sense of exhaustion that had nearly torn me apart in my previous life surged back into my heart in an instant. I looked at Qi Yuan as he approached me. His face, distorted and warped underwater, filled me with nothing but utter revulsion. You want me to save you? In your dreams. I closed my eyes, endured the swelling pain in my lungs, and suddenly dove deeper, drawing upon the memories and experience of my past life in the water. I moved like a nimble fish. Instead of swimming toward Qi Yuan, I kicked my legs forcefully, evading his outstretched hand, and swam toward the other side of Tay Pond without looking back. There was a rockery there, the only blind spot in the stretch of water that could evade everyone's sight. Qi Yuan grabbed at thin air and swallowed several more large gulps of water. His struggling grew significantly weaker, and his body began to slowly sink. Meanwhile, I was gliding through the bone-chilling depths. The air in my lungs was nearly exhausted, and my chest felt as if it were about to burst. Just as I was reaching my limit and preparing to surface for air, a powerful hand suddenly pierced through the water and gripped my wrist tightly. The temperature of that hand was scorching, and the palm bore the rough calluses formed from years of wielding a sword. In the next instant, I was violently yanked out of the water by a massive, irresistible force. Splash! I broke the surface, greedily gulping down the cold but fresh air. The owner of that hand possessed immense strength. Gripping my wrist with a single hand, they hoisted me directly out of the Tay Pond as if lifting a sodden cat. As my knees hit the hard wooden planks, I realized that a small, jet-black whooping boat, devoid of any ornamentation, was moored behind the blind spot of the rockery. If one didn't look closely, it almost blended perfectly into the shadows of the rocks. As a cold wind blew, my entire body began to tremble uncontrollably and violently. Disregarding my disheveled state, I snapped my head up, desperate to see exactly who was lurking there in the shadows. A lavish white tiger skin was spread across the bow of the boat, and seated upon it was a man dressed in a mysterious black robe embroidered with gold pythons. He was carelessly toying with a mutton-fat jade wine cup, his long legs crossed in an utterly indolent posture. His face was handsome to the point of being otherworldly, with brows like slender bamboo and a high, straight bridge of the nose. Yet, within those narrow, deep phoenix eyes lay a solitary coldness and ruthlessness that seemed to disregard all living beings. The moment I saw his face clearly, my pupils constricted, and my breath hitched for a beat. Rong Lie, the current emperor's biological uncle, the cold-faced Prince Regent of the Great Wei dynasty, who commands a million-strong army and holds supreme power over the court. In my previous life, when I reached the pinnacle of the business world and wielded immense influence in the imperial court, even the emperor and the civil and military officials had to heed my every whim. Only the man before me was a dangerous existence that I could never truly see through, nor could I ever hope to control. Despite exhausting all my wealth and schemes, a man I instinctively wanted to avoid. He was decisive in slaughter and utterly ruthless. The corrupt officials and enemy generals who died by his hand could fill the entire Tay pond with their bones. I just never expected that our paths would cross so much earlier in this life, and at a moment when I am in such a wretched state. Rumor has it that the eldest daughter of the Jing family is deeply infatuated with the heir of the Marquis of Jing'an, loving him to the point of death. Rong Lie looked down at me with a condescending gaze, his thin lips parting slightly. His voice was low and resonant, like crushed jade striking ice, carrying a trace of undisguised mockery. But what I just witnessed was a fine performance of refusing to help and looking out only for oneself. Miss Jing, the speed at which your heart has changed is even colder than the spring waters of this Tay pool. I clenched my chattering teeth tightly and reached up to wipe the water droplets from my face, forcing myself to calm down. As it turned out, everything that had just happened on the water, including Bai Ruo pushing me in and the scenes of me avoiding Qiyuan underwater to swim away alone, had been witnessed in perfect detail by this man. Your Highness flutters me. I showed no embarrassment at being caught. Instead, I straightened my back and met his oppressive gaze, counterattacking coldly. Rumor has it that the Prince Regent loves the people as his own children. Yet, Your Highness's boat was clearly only a few yards from where the heir fell into the water. Did you not also sit idly by, watching with cold eyes as he faced death? The black-clad guard standing behind Rong Lie abruptly drew his long sword halfway, shouting sternly, "Presumptuous! How dare you be so insolent to the prince? Stand down." Rong Lie raised his hand slightly, and the guard immediately sheathed his sword, receding back into the shadows. Rong Lie leaned forward slightly, a faint trace of interest flickering in his bottomless eyes. In the entire capital, I was the first woman who dared to speak to him in such a tone. He is as dull as a pig and couldn't even guard against a woman. He deserves to die for falling into the water. Why should I save him? Rong Lie looked at me with a half-smile. As for you, clearly driven into a corner, you only needed to reach out and pull him up to gain a virtuous reputation and secure a marriage. Why did you insist on swimming toward this lightless dead end instead? Because I don't want to be dragged into the mire. I stared into his eyes, my words ringing with conviction. A drowning person, once they catch hold of a piece of driftwood, will cling to it with a death grip until they drag the wood down into the depths with them. I won't save him because his life isn't worth trading mine for. As for that hypocritical reputation and those disgusting marriage prospects, whoever wants them can have them. In this great Wei dynasty, where a woman's lack of talent is a virtue and reputation is greater than heaven, my shocking words were nothing short of treasonous. But after listening, Rong Lie suddenly let out a low, soft laugh. The laughter vibrated from his chest, carrying a sense of bloodthirsty delight. What a fine unworthy. Rong Lie stood up, casually unfastening his heavy cloak embroidered with dark gold cloud patterns and tossing it precisely over my head, shielding both my drenched curves and the bone-chilling cold. The cloak carried the faint scent of his agarwood incense, mingled with the metallic, blood and iron aura of the battlefield. You are far more interesting than those weeping, delicate flowers in the capital. Just then, a louder commotion erupted from the other side of the rockery. The prince has been rescued. Quick, call the imperial physician. Oh no, why isn't the prince breathing? Quick, press on his chest. Where is that Jing girl? Why has she vanished after falling in? Could she have drowned at the bottom? Listening to the commotion coming from over there, I knew that Qiyuan had ultimately been fished out by the patrolling guards. Scoundrels live forever. He wouldn't die that easily. Meanwhile, Bai Ruo must be racking her brains right now to fabricate a lie. preparing to frame me, the dead woman, for the attempted murder of the prince and subsequent suicide once my corpse surfaced. It seems the people over there are anxious to find you. Rong Lie sat back in his chair, his slender fingers tapping on the tabletop with a rhythmic thump. Thump. If you go out now, soaked to the bone, your reputation will be utterly ruined, and you'll be branded with the infamy of standing by and watching someone die. He paused, his gaze locking onto me like a hawk. Xinhuan, not just anyone can board this prince's ship. Rong Lie's voice carried a dangerous undertone of absolute control. Since you have landed on my ship today, if you wish to leave unscathed, from this moment forth, your life belongs to me. I tilted my head back, looking up at this peerless, powerful minister, a man I hadn't dared to even glance at in my previous life. Yet who, by a twist of fate in this one, had pulled me from the freezing waters. I needed power. I needed a blade sharper than the one I held in my last life to utterly sever the lifelines of Qi Yuan and Bai Ruo, and to protect the entire Jing family. And Rong Lie was, without a doubt, the most indestructible ship in the Great Wei dynasty. To be able to board the Prince Regent's ship is this humble daughter's honor. I pulled the cloak, still warm with his body heat, tighter around me and made my choice without hesitation. As long as your highness dares to take me, I, Xinhuan, will surely become the most useful blade in your hand. Rong Lie's eyes shone brightly. He curled his lips in satisfaction and uttered a single word to the boatman at the stern. Go. Like a ghost, the black-topped boat silently sliced through the surface of Tay Pond. Under the cover of rockeries and reed beds, it slowly drifted away from that clamorous quagmire, leaving the conspiracies and schemes far behind. The boat did not leave the eldest princess's manor. Instead, it bypassed the rockery that obstructed the view and headed straight toward the waterside pavilion at the front of Tay Pond. In front of the pavilion, everything had already descended into utter chaos. Qi Yuan was hauled up by several guards, who scrambled to pull him out. He now lay sprawled on the bluestone pavement like a dead dog, violently retching up bile. Upon hearing the news, the Marchioness of Jing'an rushed over and threw herself onto Qi Yuan, wailing and lamenting, making for quite a chaotic scene. Meanwhile, Bai Ruo was kneeling before the eldest princess and the Marchioness, weeping so hysterically that she looked as if she might faint at any moment. Your Highness, my lady, you must seek justice for the heir. Bai Ruo pulled out a handkerchief to cover her face, her voice shrill and filled with grievance. Cousin. She was jealous because the heir has been looking after me lately, and she started an argument with him by the shore. In a fit of rage, she pushed the heir into the lake. I tried my best to hold her back, but she was so consumed by guilt and fear that she jumped in after him. Her whereabouts are still unknown. What a clever move, striking first with a false accusation while the evidence was buried at the bottom of the lake. Her words were airtight, shifting all responsibility for Qi Yuan's fall onto me while branding me with the labels of consumed by jealousy and committing suicide out of guilt. Had I truly perished at the bottom of the lake, the Jing family's reputation would have been utterly ruined by her, while she would have emerged as the frail, innocent, and loyal cousin who risked everything to protect her master. That Jing girl always seemed so straightforward. Who knew her heart could be so malicious? Exactly. She even dared to push her own fiancé. She deserves to die. Influenced by Bai Ruo's slander, the surrounding noble ladies and madams pointed at the lake's surface, their words laced with venom. What a masterful performance of twisting the truth. It's truly a waste of talent that cousin Bai Ruo isn't performing as a lead actress in a theater. A cold, mocking voice suddenly rose from the water, cutting through the surrounding clamor and falling clearly into everyone's ears. Everyone was shocked, turning their heads in unison to look toward the surface of the lake. A small black canopied boat had pulled up to the shore at some unknown moment. I stood up slowly from the bow, meeting everyone's stunned gazes as if they were seeing a ghost. Although my hair was soaking wet and dripping with water, I was draped in a large, luxurious black gold-woven python robe cloak. The style of that cloak and the subtle patterns of the five-clawed golden dragon were regulations that only the highest-ranking nobility of the Great Wei dynasty dared to use. And from behind me, a tall and slender black figure slowly stepped out. Rong Lie stood with his hands behind his back, a chilling, faint smile playing across his face, which was as handsome as Ashura's. He did not speak, but the terrifying pressure tempered in a sea of blood and mountains of corpses instantly enveloped the entire waterside pavilion. The Prince Regent? Someone cried out in alarm, and immediately after, everyone present, including the high and mighty eldest princess and the wailing marchioness, turned pale. They knelt down in unison, not even daring to breathe too loudly. This humble official's wife/daughter pays respects to His Royal Highness the Prince Regent. May you live for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. 10,000 years. Bai Ruo knelt at the very front of the crowd. When she looked up and saw me standing there unscathed, draped in the regent's own cloak, the color drained from her face instantly, and her eyes filled with a look of unbelievable terror. Cousin? You're not dead? Bai Ruo's voice was trembling uncontrollably, ignoring everyone else. I walked straight up to Bai Ruo and looked down at this treacherous white lotus from a position of absolute authority. What is it? Are you disappointed to see me alive, dear cousin? I let out a cold sneer, pressing closer with every step. Didn't you just say that I was the one who pushed the heir into the water and then committed suicide out of guilt? Fine. Today, in the presence of the regent and the grand princess, let us settle this case once and for all. I am not talking nonsense. It was you who pushed him. Bai Ruo remained stubborn even in the face of certain doom, attempting to win sympathy with her tears. Cousin, I know you were frightened by falling into the water, but you cannot pin the blame on me. You still dare to quibble. I cut her off sharply, my gaze as sharp as a blade. First, when I was speaking with Qi Yuan just now, there was a distance of at least 3 feet between us. No matter how far I stretched my arm, I couldn't possibly have touched him. But the person standing directly behind Qi Yuan, pressed right up against him, was you, Bai Ruo. Second, the edge of the Tay pool is damp year-round, and the stone steps are covered in moss. Before Qi Yuan fell into the water, I clearly saw you pretend to slip. You not only stepped heavily on the hem of Qi Yuan's robe but also took the opportunity to give him a violent shove from behind. It was precisely because of your push that he lost his balance and fell into the lake. As soon as these words were spoken, a collective gasp echoed from the surrounding crowd. Although Qi Yuan was still coughing up water, he managed to force his eyes open and looked at Bai Ruo in shock. You're framing me, Bai Ruo shrieked, tears streaming down her face. I'm a weak woman with no strength to speak of. How could I possibly push the heir? And why would I even want to? Why? Because you are not only malicious, but greedy. I coldly exposed her scheme. You pushed him into the water, calculating that since I know how to swim and adore the heir, I would definitely jump in to save him. Once I had physical contact with him in front of everyone, for the sake of my reputation, I would be forced to marry into the Qi family along with the Xing family's vast fortune. And you would not only successfully seize my dowry but also continue to be the cinnabar mole. Close to his heart, standing to the side, the Marchioness's face turned ashen with rage. Although she also coveted the Xing family's wealth, she could absolutely not tolerate an orphaned girl who used her son's life as a bargaining chip for a scheme. Unfortunately, you miscalculated one step. I stared coldly into Bai Ruo's completely panicked eyes. You didn't expect that I would see through your tricks today and refuse to enter the water. Seeing your plan fail, fearing that Qi Yuan might actually drown, and even more afraid of being exposed, you grew desperate. While my back was turned, you shoved me into the water as well. You wanted to use me as your scapegoat and pin this entire crime on my head. No, I didn't. Princess, please see the truth. Madam, please believe me. Bai Ruo kowtowed frantically, her voice hoarse from sobbing. My cousin has gone mad. She's framing me. Whether it is a frame-up or not, we will know once it is tested. I turned around and curtsied slightly toward Rong Lie. Your Highness, I make bold to ask that your guards perform an inspection. Rong Lie's deep gaze lingered on me for a moment, a trace of imperceptible admiration flickering in his eyes. He lazily lifted a finger. Go and check. 2 black-clad guards immediately stepped forward, roughly pinning Bai Ruo down. Reporting to your Highness, the guard announced loudly after his inspection. The sole of Miss Bai's right shoe is indeed covered in the slippery moss unique to the edges of the stone steps. Furthermore, a clear footprint from a woman's shoe, stained with moss, was found on the back hem of the Marquis of Jingan's heir's robe. The evidence was irrefutable, striking like a resounding slap across the faces of Bai Ruo and the Qi family. The noble ladies who had been accusing me just moments ago now cast looks of disdain and disgust at Bai Ruo. To go as far as committing murder and orchestrating a series of frames just to snatch a marriage and fortune, such a calculating mind was truly appalling. Qi Yuan finally caught his breath. He struggled to sit up and stared fixedly at Bai Ruo, his eyes filled with disbelief and the fury of betrayal. Ruo, it was actually you? You actually tried to kill me? No, cousin, listen to me. I didn't mean it. I just... Bai Ruo completely broke down. She tried to grab Qi Yuan's sleeve again, but he struck her across the face with a vicious slap. You bitch! Qi Yuan cursed in a rage. Watching this pair of scumbags turn on each other, a wave of unprecedented satisfaction surged through my heart. The infamy of my previous life was finally, at this very moment, washed clean by my own hands. It seems the truth has come to light. Rong Lie finally spoke, his voice not loud, yet carrying a chilling authority that held the power of life and death. He walked slowly to my side, his gaze sweeping over the crowd trembling on their knees. I was on the boat and saw everything that just transpired with my own eyes. This woman surnamed Bai not only pushed someone into the water but also had the audacity to frame the legitimate daughter of the Jing family. Rong Lie let out a cold sneer, his voice laced with a chilling murderous intent. What? Do you take me for a blind man? Your Highness, please appease your anger. The eldest princess and the Marchioness trembled violently, breaking into a cold sweat. With the Prince Regent himself testifying, the matter was settled. There was no longer any possibility of overturning the situation. Bai Ruo slumped onto the ground, her face as pale as ash. She knew she was finished. Having offended the Prince Regent and being utterly disgraced within the circles of the capital's elite, she would never be able to redeem herself in this lifetime. I pulled the cloak, scented with agarwood, tighter around me and stood tall beside Rong Lie. In this life, I will not only clear my name, but I will also ensure that those who once trampled upon me will forever remain kneeling at my feet, looking up at me. The farce at the eldest princess's manor came to an end in an extremely brutal fashion. Bai Ruo's face was slapped to a pulp by the Marchioness of Jing'an right then and there, and she was dragged out of the waterside pavilion like a dead dog. To appease the regent's fury, the Marquis of Jing'an's household worked through the night to force-feed this once pampered cousin mute medicine before selling her to a low-class brothel in the bitter cold of the far north, where she would be trampled upon by anyone and never rise again. As for me, draped in the 5-clawed golden dragon cloak belonging to the regent, I boarded Rong Lie's black and gold carriage under the watchful eyes of the crowd. Inside the carriage, premium agarwood incense burned, filling the space with a cozy warmth. I untied the heavy cloak and offered it back with both hands. I am deeply grateful to your highness for your rescue today. Rong Lie did not take it. He leaned lazily against the soft cushions, his deep, narrow phoenix eyes scanning me up and down. His gaze was piercing, as if it could peel away my flesh to see through to my reborn soul. Jinwan, you are thanking me too early. Rong Lie toyed with a black jade thumb ring with his slender fingers. His voice was low and languid, yet it carried the sharp edge of one accustomed to cold-blooded execution. This prince never makes a losing deal. Since you have boarded my ship, you ought to show your sincerity. Tell me, what can you give me, and what do you hope to gain from me? When speaking to a clever man, there was no need to beat around the bush. I raised my head, meeting the gaze of this tyrannical prince, whose power dominated the court. Without flinching, your highness holds command over a mighty army and strikes all throughout the northern border. However, those old fogies in the Ministry of Revenue have long withheld provisions and winter clothing for your troops, citing an empty national treasury. I said, calmly laying out my bargaining chips. Though my Jing family comes from a lineage of military officers, I have secretly managed numerous trading firms over the years. With but a word from you, I am willing to commit the entire wealth of the Jing clan and covertly consolidate the grain routes across the 7 provinces of Jiangnan. I guarantee that within 10 years, your iron cavalry will never want for supplies, remaining formidable and well-fed. Rong Lie's hand, which had been idling with his thumb ring, paused slightly. The intrigue in his eyes deepened, now tinged with a hint of bloodthirsty excitement. The noble daughters of the Great Wei dynasty usually had heads filled with nothing but music, chess, calligraphy, and petty jealousies. Yet this young girl, who had just crawled out of the freezing water, spoke of national strategy and the granaries of the world the moment she opened her mouth. What bold words! And what ruthless courage! Rong Lie suddenly let out a soft chuckle, leaning his body slightly forward as his hauntingly handsome face abruptly closed in on mine. So, what is it that you want? I want Qi Yuan to be utterly discredited and left with nothing. I stared into his eyes, enunciating every word as if they were dripped in blood. The first step. I want his title as the heir of the Marquis of Jing'an to vanish into thin air. In my previous life, I worked tirelessly, using my dowry to pave the way for him just to secure his wealth and status as the heir. In this life, I will personally smash it all to pieces. Deal. The corners of Rong Lie's thin lips curled slightly, a chilling glint flashing in his eyes. What this prince admires most is a woman like you, ruthless, cold-blooded, and clear about her debts of gratitude and revenge. With the alliance formed, Rong Lie and I were like two blades about to be unsheathed, coordinating with seamless precision. With Rong Lie's intimidation in the imperial court, the Marquis of Jing'an's household lived in constant trepidation. To preserve what little remained of the Qi family's dignity, the Marquis pulled strings everywhere, even resorting to high-interest loans in an attempt to secure a lucrative post for Qi Yuan in the Ministry of Works. He hoped to give him a veneer of prestige before the upcoming autumn imperial examinations and wash away the disgrace of the drowning incident. The position they had their eyes on was the supervision of the renovations for the royal enclosure in the west of the city. When I received this news, I was sitting in the Jing family's accounting room. Looking at the intelligence in my hand, I couldn't help but let out a cold sneer. Qi Yuan, oh Qi Yuan, you truly never change your ways. In my previous life, Qi Yuan had secretly embezzled funds meant for the repair of the royal hunting grounds to cover his gambling debts and deficits at the brothels. Back then, I used my own dowry to plug that hole, saving him from imprisonment. In this life, without my purse to rely on, I want to see how he intends to fill it. I immediately activated the Jing family's secret contacts. Instead of blocking him from securing this post, I secretly pushed things along, ensuring Qi Yuan took over this lucrative assignment with extreme ease. Over the next 2 months, as expected, Qi Yuan suffered a relapse of his old habits. Thinking the danger had passed, he not only used substandard materials for the repairs but grew so audacious that he secretly embezzled a full 50,000 taels out of the 80,000 taels of silver allocated by the Ministry of Works. With this illicit money in hand, he spent his nights in revelry at Pingkong Ward, attempting to use wine and women to numb the pain of Bai Ruo's betrayal and the humiliation I had dealt him in public. Yet, every single account he embezzled, every invoice he handled, and even the serial numbers of the banknotes he gifted to the courtesans in the brothels were meticulously transcribed by my people and delivered overnight to the desk in the Prince Regent's manor. The day chosen to close the net was the day of the Grand Imperial Court. In the Golden Throne Hall, the Emperor was listening to the Marquis of Jing'an boast about how diligent and conscientious his son had been at the Ministry of Works, shamelessly requesting that the Emperor bestow an award upon Qi Yuan. Just as the civil and military officials were preparing to chime in, the Prince Regent, Rong Lie, who had been resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened them. A reward? The Marquis of Jing'an's skin is truly thicker than the corner of these city walls. Rong Lie stood up with a cold sneer and threw a thick black ledger directly at the Marquis's face, as if he were tossing out trash. With a thud, the ledger's pages scattered all over the floor. Open your eyes and look. That diligent son of yours used substandard materials, employing rotten wood and inferior mud to repair the royal hunting grounds. He embezzled a full 50,000 taels of silver from the repair funds, spending every bit of it sleeping with courtesans in Pingkong Ward. Rong Lie's voice was like ice from the depths of the 9 hells, echoing throughout the main hall. The Emperor is about to depart for the autumn hunt. If the beast-watching platform were to suddenly collapse and startle His Majesty, Marquis Jing'an, even if your Qi family had 9 heads, it wouldn't be enough to pay for it. As soon as these words were spoken, the entire court fell into a deathly silence. The Emperor immediately dispatched the Imperial Guards to inspect the hunting grounds. In less than half an hour, the commander of the Imperial Guards rushed back, confirming that Rong Lie's words were true. The newly built beast-watching platform would crumble and shed dirt with a single kick. It was nothing more than a shoddy tofu drag project. The emperor flew into a towering rage, so incensed that he smashed the paperweight on the imperial desk. "You insolent wretch! How dare you?" the emperor roared. "Guards! Hear my decree. Qi Yuan has embezzled funds, broken the law, and disregarded the dignity of the imperial family. He is hereby stripped of his title as heir to the Marquis of Jing'an and demoted to a commoner. He shall receive 50 strokes of the imperial rod and be sent to the death cells of the Court of Judicial Review to await trial. The Marquis of Jing'an has failed in his duty to raise his son. He is to be fined 3 years. Salary and demoted 1 rank in nobility." The Marquis of Jing'an's vision went black, and he collapsed unconscious right there in the main hall. Outside the Meridian Gate, the autumn wind blew bleakly. I sat in a private booth on the 2nd floor of the tea house across the street, pushing open half a window to watch the scene below with cold indifference. The once lofty heir of the Marquis of Jing'an, who always dressed in white and prided himself on being as pure and noble as the breeze and the moon, was now being dragged out of the Meridian Gate by 2 burly imperial guards like a dead dog. He had been beaten so severely by the court bastinado that his flesh was torn and his lower body was a bloody mess. His white prison garb was completely stained crimson with blood. His hair was disheveled, and his shrill wails sounded like those of a stray cur. Gone was the arrogance and disdain he had shown in our previous life when he pointed at me and denounced me as a venomous woman. He seemed to sense something, and with great effort, he raised his blood-stained face, following the gaze toward the direction of the tea house. Our eyes met. I stood upstairs, dressed in opulence with a look of disdain. He was below, covered in mud and utterly disgraced. The moment he saw me clearly, Qi Yuan's pupils contracted violently. His mouth hung open as he seemed to finally realize who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes. A mixture of extreme shock, regret, and terror surged through him, causing him to cough up a large mouthful of blood before losing consciousness from the sheer agony. "Do you find this satisfying already?" A deep voice came from behind. Rong Lie had approached me at some unknown point. He wasn't wearing his court robes, but rather a dark purple casual robe. His broad palm rested naturally on the window frame beside me, forming a highly possessive stance. "This is only the beginning." I picked up the hot tea from the table and took a gentle sip, concealing the frantic killing intent in my eyes. "Stripping him of his title as heir is just the appetizer. What I want is for the entire Jing'an Marquis household to be completely erased from the map of Great Wei from this day forward." Rong Lie looked at my cold and ambitious profile, his Adam's apple bobbing slightly as he let out a deeply magnetic, low chuckle. "Very well. This prince shall play along with you." His slender fingers gently pinched a stray lock of my hair. "My blade has already been sharpened. Jing Yuan. Next. How do you wish to kill?" After Qi Yuan was imprisoned, the Jing'an Marquis household was like a dilapidated temple with its load-bearing pillars removed, collapsing with a thunderous crash. However, the rumors in the capital did not subside entirely. Although Bai Ruo's malicious act of pushing me in public had been exposed, among certain self-righteous noblewomen, I, Jing Yuan, still earned a reputation for being unrelenting, excessively calculating, and too ruthless. After all, according to the social norms of the Great Wei dynasty, a woman was expected to swallow her grievances and repay evil with kindness, even when suffering the greatest injustices, rather than driving someone to ruin as I had done. Those poisonous whispers were like invisible mosquitoes, swarming around the Zheng household. I personally didn't care for such empty reputations. As long as I held wealth and power in my hands, they could curse me as fiercely as they liked behind my back. But they would still have to kowtow when they saw me. But Rong Lie would not have it. How could I allow this pack of fools to wag their tongues behind my ally's back? It was the day before Qi Yuan was sentenced to exile. Rong Lie directly mobilized the black armor guards of the Prince Regent's estate, not only surrounding the dilapidated Jing'an Marquis estate but also moving the Court of Judicial Review's proceedings directly to the bustling intersection of the capital's East Market. That day, the autumn air was crisp, and the East Market was packed to the point where not a drop of water could trickle through. The eldest princess, various high-ranking officials and nobles, and thousands of commoners were all forcibly invited by the Prince Regent's iron fist to witness the trial. I sat on a large red sandalwood chair beside Rong Lie, watching the row of prisoners kneeling below, trembling in fear. Aside from the disheveled and haggard Qi Yuan, there were several familiar faces: Bai Ruo's personal maid, Heir, as well as several stewards and elderly maids from the Jing'an Marquis estate. Today, this prince shall not only preside over the trial of Qi Yuan's embezzlement, but also, in the name of the laws of the Great Wei dynasty, thoroughly purge the nauseating demons and monsters lurking within these inner chambers. Rong Lie coldly tilted his chin, and the hidden guards at his side immediately slammed a thick stack of letters and a ledger down beside the gavel. "Read," Rong Lie barked. The Chief Justice of the Court of Judicial Review wiped away cold sweat, trembling as he picked up the letters and began to read them aloud to the public. Those were the handwritten letters Bai Ruo had hidden in a secret compartment of her bedstead, along with the ledgers detailing her payments to failed scholars and street thugs in the capital over the years. As the contents of the letters were made public, a dead silence fell over the room, followed by an uncontrollable outburst of gasps and exclamations. It turned out that all the rumors circulating in the capital over the years about me being jealous, domineering, and oppressing my younger cousin were entirely orchestrated by Bai Ruo. The letters clearly documented how she had taken laxatives to frame me for poisoning her, how she had intentionally torn her own clothes to feign being beaten by me, and how she had paid scholars to turn these incidents into vulgar stories to be widely circulated in major tea houses. But what made my soul tremble the most was the diary that recorded every one of her schemes and machinations. Heir was kicked to the ground by the secret guard, crying out as she confessed the entire plan. "It was Miss Bai who forced me to do it." Miss Bai said that as long as Miss Zhang's reputation was ruined at the spring banquet, the heir would grow to loathe her. Miss Bai even calculated exactly how to push the heir into the water. Heir kowtowed violently, pointing at the ledger. Miss Bai instructed that if Miss Zhang really jumped into the water to save the heir that day, we were to shout from the shore that it was Miss Zhang who pushed him. Once Miss Zhang had dragged the heir to the bank and was exhausted, we were to quietly hold her head underwater from below, snatching the credit away and telling the world that it was Miss Bai who saved the heir regardless of her own life. Boom! Hearing these words, it felt as if a bolt of lightning had exploded in my mind. Every detail from my previous life pieced together perfectly at this moment, like a jigsaw puzzle. No wonder in my past life, after I had risked everything to save Qi Yuan and bring him to shore, I felt the back of my head being slammed into the water, nearly drowning me. No wonder when I woke from my coma, the debt of saving his life had been credited to Bai Ruo, while I had become the venomous woman who pushed him in. As it turns out, none of this was a mere twist of fate. It was a meticulously crafted, scorched earth scheme designed by Bai Ruo from the very beginning to devour me whole and then trample me into the depths of hell. Had I not been reborn, had I softened my heart and jumped that day, I would have repeated the same disastrous mistakes in this life. I gripped the armrests of the chair with a deathly force, my nails nearly embedding themselves into the wood. The blood throughout my body was boiling, a wild, violent release of emotions suppressed over 2 lifetimes, finally finding vindication. "You animal, you poisonous woman, you absolute bitch." Kneeling below, Qi Yuan felt as if he had been struck by a bolt from the blue after hearing all of this. He clutched his head in agony, letting out a hoarse roar as tears, snot, and blood smeared across his face. It was only at this moment that this conceited and foolish man finally understood that his self-righteous true love was nothing more than an evil spirit who had played him like a puppet and nearly cost him his life. "Qi Yuan." I stood up, looking down at his broken form. My voice was not loud, yet every word pierced his heart like a dagger. "You are as dull as a pig and utterly blind to character. For the sake of a venomous snake harboring malicious intent, you personally destroyed the path to greatness that the Zhang family laid out for you. Everything that has happened today is your own doing." Qi Yuan looked at me in despair, his lips trembling violently. Suddenly, he slammed his head down, striking the bluestone floor with a heavy thud. "Wanner, I was wrong. I was truly wrong. I was blind. I failed you. You are not worthy of speaking my name." I looked away in disgust, refusing to grant him another glance. With both physical evidence and witness testimony present, the truth was finally revealed to the world. A thunderous roar of discussion erupted from the crowd. The noble ladies and madams who had once looked down on me because of the rumors now had faces filled with shame and shock. Good heavens! How can there be such a malicious woman in this world? To even scheme against someone who saved her life. Miss Jing has been so wronged, bearing such an infamous reputation for all these years for nothing. Indeed, if it were me, I would have been driven mad long ago. Not only was Miss Jing not defeated, but she remained so calm and decisive in exposing such a conspiracy. This is the true spirit of a daughter from a military lineage, the true grace of a prestigious family. The tide turned in an instant. At this moment, I not only cleared my name regarding the drowning incident of this life, but I also completely shattered the infamy and grievances that had haunted me like a nightmare in my previous life. The people of the Great Wei dynasty had always admired the strong and sympathized with the wronged weak, and I possessed both the means to prove my innocence and the blatant backing of the Prince Regent. From that day forward, the name Jingwan was no longer a laughingstock or a synonym for a poisonous woman in the capital. Instead, it became a legend, clear-headed, indestructible, and even awe-inspiring. My name resounded throughout the capital, and no one dared to look down on me ever again. The Minister of the Court of Judicial Review announced the verdict in public. Qi Yuan's crimes were unforgivable, and he was to be escorted immediately to the miasma-ridden lands of Lingnan, never to return to the imperial court. As for the wicked servants who participated in framing me, all were to be beaten to death. The dust had finally settled. As the crowd gradually dispersed, I let out a long, deep breath. It felt as though the massive boulder that had weighed on my heart for 2 entire lifetimes had finally been shattered to pieces, leaving even my breathing incredibly light and free. A cloak, carrying the scent of agarwood, settled onto my shoulders. Rong Lie stood beside me, tying the fastenings of the cloak. He kept his eyes lowered. Those phoenix eyes, usually so violent and fierce, had shed their usual ice in this moment, reflecting a rare touch of tenderness. 2 lifetimes of grievances? He suddenly spoke in a low voice, keenly catching the momentary slip of my emotions. Though I do not know what you have been through, from this day forward, as long as I am here, even if the heavens of the Great Wei dynasty were to collapse, I will be the one to hold them up for you. My heart jolted violently, and I looked up to meet his deep, soul-piercing gaze. Under Rong Lie's iron-fisted protection, I have not only severed the shackles of my past but have also embraced a new life. I know that for me, Jingwan, the golden age has only just begun. On the 8th day of the 11th lunar month, heavy snow fell in flurries, and the 10-mile pavilion outside the capital was coated in a thick layer of bitter frost. Draped in a flawless, premium white snow fox cloak and cradling a golden-laid hand-warmer, I stood silently atop the high city walls, looking down at the official road that led toward the bitter cold of the far north. Today marks the day of Qi Yuan's departure into exile. According to the original sentence from the Court of Judicial Review, Qi Yuan was to be exiled to Lingnan. However, Rong Lie felt that was far too lenient. Exercising his power as the Prince Regent, he changed Qi Yuan's destination to the extreme north of Ningguda with a single stroke of his pen. Not only that, Rong Lie specifically ordered for the disfigured and mute Bai Ruo to be dragged out of a low-class brothel and placed into the same exile group as Qi Yuan, since their love was once as solid as gold. And they didn't hesitate to commit murder for one another's sake. This prince shall show mercy and allow them to be a pair of ill-fated lovebirds. At that time, Rong Lie was toying with my hair, his smile resembling a malevolent spirit crawling out of hell. Below the city walls at this moment, the wind and snow are howling. Qi Yuan's hair was disheveled, and he wore nothing but a thin, tattered prison uniform, his hands and feet bound by heavy shackles of refined iron. His legs, which had never properly healed from the imperial flogging, had turned a bruised purple in the freezing snow. With every step he took, he dragged a jarring trail of blood across the white expanse. Walking beside him was his once delicate white lotus cousin, Bai Ruo. Now, Bai Ruo's face was covered in a crisscross of horrific whip scars, and her withered appearance made her look like a haggard old woman. Shivering uncontrollably from the cold, she instinctively tried to lean toward Qi Yuan, seeking even a sliver of warmth. However, the moment she drew near, a surge of extreme malice erupted in Qi Yuan's deathly, ashen eyes. Like a rabid dog, He lunged at her, pinning her into the snow and strangling her neck as he began to bite and pummel her in a frenzied rage. Bitch! It's all your fault. You ruined my life. Give me back my title. Give me back my wealth and glory. Chi Yuan roared hoarsely. Bai Ruo could make no sound. She could only whimper in agony, clawing at Chi Yuan's face with her long nails like a wild beast. The two of them rolled together in the filthy slush, brawling and tearing at each other as if they wished to devour one another's flesh. The guards responsible for the escort stood aside, watching the spectacle with cold sneers. Only when the two were beaten to the brink of death did the guards step forward, lashing them mercilessly with barbed whips and driving them back onto the road like cattle. I stood on high ground, watching those two enemies, who had once driven me to despair and forced me to bear a lifetime of infamy, torturing each other in the mire like ants, stumbling toward an abyss from which there is no return. There was not a single ripple in my heart, nor any ecstasy following the victory. There was only an ultimate sense of calm, born from completely severing the shackles of the past. From this day forward, they deserve nothing more than to spend the rest of their lives in a frigid hell, gnawing on each other's misery. As for me, I shall ascend to the most dazzling peak of this world. The wind is strong outside. Be careful not to catch a chill. A voluminous black cloak, carrying the familiar scent of agarwood, fell from behind, wrapping me firmly into a warm and broad chest. Rong Lie had approached me from behind at some point. He glanced down at the prison carriage gradually vanishing into the wind and snow, following my gaze, and let out a cold sneer. Even a single glance at them is enough to soil your eyes. I turned around, meeting Rong Lie's deep and burning phoenix eyes, and broke into a bright smile. Your Highness is right. The old debts are settled. It is time to look forward. Rong Lie stared at me intently before suddenly reaching out, stroking my cheek with immense treasure. This cold-faced power player, who had slaughtered countless on the battlefield and manipulated the imperial court at will, now had eyes brimming with a tenderness he himself had likely not yet realized. Xinhuan, the provisions you promised me have already filled the 8 great granaries of the northern frontier. Your Xing family's trading firms have also completely seized control of the Great Way's economic lifeblood. Rong Lie lowered his head slightly, his warm breath brushing against my ear. You, as a blade, are not only useful but so sharp that I find myself loath to let go. He took a sharp step back and dropped to one knee atop the city walls amidst the swirling snow. The most noble Prince Regent of the Great Wei dynasty had actually knelt before me. He drew a blood jade tally carved with a soaring phoenix from his robes and presented it to me with both hands. This tally can mobilize the 300,000 iron cavalry under my command. Today, I offer these 300,000 troops as a betrothal gift to the head of the Xing family. Are you willing to marry me? To become the sole mistress of the Prince Regent's manor, and share this world with me? Looking at the undisguised ambition and sincere love in his eyes, I couldn't help but feel my own grow warm with tears. In my previous life, I exhausted everything to please a worthless man, only to be rewarded with a desolate death from illness. In this life, I hold immense wealth and strategize every step, only to encounter the most powerful man in the world, who resonates with my soul as we meet at the summit. Without hesitation, I reached out both hands to take the heavy military tally, while simultaneously placing my own hand into his broad, calloused palm. I do. The following year, as the spring flowers bloomed, the Prince Regent's estate hosted the most magnificent wedding since the founding of the Great Wei dynasty. On that day, the entire capital was submerged in a sea of red silk and festive joy. I sat within a red gold phoenix sedan carried by 16 bearers, listening to the deafening roar of firecrackers and the cheers of the common people outside. My dowry stretched all the way from the Xing estate to the Regent's manor, spanning 10 miles, a true 10-mile red dowry. Contained within were not only countless gold and silver treasures, silks, and satins, but also numerous land deeds and merchant seals that symbolized the economic lifeblood of half the Great Wei dynasty. This was the empire I had built, and it was the source of my confidence in marrying Rong Lie. Rong Lie sat atop a tall horse, his usual cold and stern features softened considerably by the vibrant red wedding robes. When the sedan door was kicked open, he did not wait for the matchmaker to assist. Instead, he personally reached out his hand and led me out of the bridal carriage. Under the reverent and envious gazes of the civil and military officials, We stepped over the brazier, walked down the long red carpet, and performed the formal bows to heaven and earth. As night fell, we stood atop the launching pavilion, the highest point of the Prince Regent's estate. Rong Lie and I stood side by side. Having removed the heavy phoenix crown, I leaned against his shoulder, looking down at the capital city below, a tapestry of 10,000 flickering lights and flourishing splendor. A gentle breeze brushed past, carrying the fragrance of spring blossoms, with no trace left of the bone-chilling cold from Tay Pond. Rong Lie embraced me from behind, his broad palms covering my folded hands, pointing toward the vast expanse of mountains and rivers in the distance. His voice was deep and commanding. Wan Wan, look at this world. Half of the Great Way's territory was conquered by my iron cavalry, and the other half was built upon the prosperity paved by your Jing family's merchant firm. He lowered his head, pressing a deep kiss against my ear, as if carving a vow for all lifetimes to come. From this day forward, you and I shall stand side by side to share these 10,000 miles of rivers and mountains. If anyone dares to cause you even the slightest grievance, I shall raise the world to the ground. I gripped his hand back, our fingers interlocking tightly. My gaze swept past the layers of palace walls toward the vast, distant night sky, a reckless, haughty smile spreading across my lips as if looking down upon the world. Very well. Together, we shall ensure this world remains forever prostrate at our feet. The icy, hopeless waters of my past life were finally and completely evaporated by the blazing fire and absolute power of this lifetime. I, Xin Wan, have no regrets left in this life. I have finally become the most dazzling legend in this world. And that brings our story to an end. Thank you for listening and for your patience. Subscribe to the channel for new historical romance stories every day.